Something strange is happening on the Kenyan Savanna. 2 decades after a seemingly innocuous event, lions have begun to change their hunting methods. They are killing more buffalo, but they are ignoring herds of zebras. Something never seen before. What happened? How did tiny ants, giant trees, African elephants, and apex predators become entangled in such a strange relationship? To understand this mystery, we must go back in time, to when it all began. In the early 2000s, on Kenya's vast Laikipia Plateau, a small, seemingly harmless invader quietly arrived. It was the big-headed ant, a creature so small it could fit on the tip of your finger. But don't let its size fool you. They are masters of the art of invasion, nature's silent conquerors. No one knows exactly where they came from, but scientists believe they snuck into the land by hitchhiking on imported agricultural shipments. At first glance, big-headed ants don't look like much, just little creatures scurrying around underfoot. But beneath their unassuming exterior lies a force capable of shaking up entire ecosystems. Not only are they good at reproducing, but they also have a ruthless territorial strategy that pushes native species to the brink of extinction. And then, as they began to expand their influence across the Kenyan savanna, a strange and terrifying chain reaction was set in motion. A story that few could have expected. Big-headed ants are not your average ants around the house. They are invaders with a surprising survival strategy. While many ant species have a single queen, big-headed ants form multi-queen kingdoms, where dozens or even hundreds of queens coexist and reproduce non-stop all year long. The result? Mega-colonies that stretch for miles, like giant underground cities bustling with life. But what makes them a real threat is their insatiable hunger. They don't just hunt, they destroy. Anything that comes into their sight, insects, spiders, even tiny baby birds, becomes a cold-blooded feast. No native creature is safe from their approach. And when big-headed ants invade a territory, the ecosystem pays a high price, very high. Big-headed ants are not your average ants around the house. They are invaders with a surprising survival strategy. While many ant species have a single queen, big-headed ants form multi-queen kingdoms, where dozens or even hundreds of queens coexist and reproduce non-stop all year long. The result? Mega-colonies that stretch for miles, like giant underground cities bustling with life. But what makes them a real threat is their insatiable hunger. They don't just hunt, they destroy. Anything that comes into their sight, insects, spiders, even tiny baby birds, becomes a cold-blooded feast. No native creature is safe from their approach. And when big-headed ants invade a territory, the ecosystem pays a high price, very high. When the giants of the savanna, elephants or giraffes, approach with the intention of nibbling on the lush green foliage, a fight breaks out. Waves of tiny acacia ants rush out from the hollow thorns on the tree trunks, like an elite army. They do not hesitate, do not fear. They cling to the thick skin of the invaders, bite hard and inject venom into the most sensitive places, around the mouth, around the eyes, in the nostrils. The burning pain makes the giant elephants retreat, while the giraffes quickly run away, leaving their hunger for young leaves unfinished. This is a perfect alliance, an agreement deeply engraved in the laws of survival of the savanna. The whispering acacia provides shelter in its hollow thorns and offers abundant sweet nectar. In return, the ant warriors do not hesitate to risk their lives to protect the canopy. For centuries, this cooperation has been the foundation of the fragile balance of this harsh land. It holds the acacia trees upright, providing shade and food for countless species. A web of life that flows smoothly, all starting with a seemingly simple relationship between a tree and an ant. But then, a tiny intruder changes everything forever. But then, they came. The invaders were small, but they carried a devastating power. The big-headed ants. At first, just a few individuals appeared, slinking in the shadows of the tree canopy. Then suddenly an entire army came, like a black flood. They didn't just attack, they slaughtered. The native warriors, the acacia ants, were completely overwhelmed. In a fierce melee, the big-headed ants tore and crushed each enemy. They spared no one. The adults were killed. The eggs and larvae were eaten, down to the last grain. One by one, the anthills, the fortresses that had protected the acacia trees for centuries, collapsed under the cold wave of invasion. When the nightmare was over, the scene was haunting. The thorns were empty, lifeless. The loyal defenders were gone. And for the first time in hundreds of years, the acacia tree stood alone, without a shield. Ahead of them lies a dangerous future, where any giant of the steppe could crush them. Without the ant warriors to protect them, the acacia trees, which once stood proudly in the savanna, were now bare and vulnerable. And as the defensive walls collapsed, the old enemies quickly returned. The giants, African elephants, giraffes, and countless leaf-eating species, came in like a storm. They were no longer deterred, each tentacle wrapped tightly around the branches, yanking and tearing the lush green foliage. Young branches snapped, the trunks cracked, and finally they crashed to the ground with a dry clang. But the tragedy did not stop there. Underground, the tiny invaders, the big-headed ants, continued to expand their power. They dug furiously, hollowed out the roots, and nested in the soil, causing the already exhausted acacia trees to collapse further. Each day, the bark cracked, the leaves turned yellow, and the branches dried up. Then one morning, the savanna was no longer green. The lush carpet of leaves disappeared, giving way to a bare, sun-burnt land. The acacia trees that had once been the soul of the land were now just skinny skeletons, falling under the harsh sun. And that was just the beginning of the collapse of an entire ecosystem. You might ask, what does this have to do with lions? Actually, it has everything to do with it. Lions, the rulers of the savanna, rely not only on strength but also on surprise. They are not the fastest animals, and cannot catch up with antelopes or zebras over long distances. Their greatest weapons are darkness and green curtains. They are masters of ambushes, and for ambushes they need cover, bushes, shade, and the acacia trunks that dot the savanna. Zebras, their favorite food, used to live in constant fear, because any bush could hide the claws of death. But now everything has changed. The savanna is bare, stretching to the horizon. With no trees to hide behind, lions are exposed from afar. Zebras suddenly have the upper hand. They can easily detect the silhouette of a predator, even when they are hundreds of meters away. And with just a few seconds of warning, the pride charged off, leaving the lions with a failed ambush. Lacking shade and shield, Africa's most powerful predators are now facing their biggest challenge in centuries. And to survive, they will have to change the way they hunt, forever. From 2003 to 2020, as the trees gradually disappeared from the savanna, a silent but drastic change took place in the world of predators. The proud lions, once masters of ambush, no longer had the advantage. Zebras, their favorite prey, became almost invulnerable. On the open grasslands, zebra herds could detect the silhouettes of lions from hundreds of meters away. Every cautious step, every ambush failed. Hunger forced them to change their strategy. And the new choice was terrifying: buffalo. A huge prey, terrible strength, horns as sharp as curved blades. Hunting buffalo meant betting on life. Just one wrong charge, one missed pounce, could mean death. But it was the only way to survive. It is hard to believe that it all started with a small creature, big-headed ants. From a silent invasion, they set off a chain reaction, forcing those at the top of the food chain to risk their lives for every meal. One small change shook the entire natural world. But the chain reaction doesn't stop there. The disappearance of the acacia trees affects not just lions or zebras, but also seemingly unrelated creatures. The magnificent starlings that once chirped and nested in the shade of the acacia trees. Now their fragile nests are exposed to the harsh sun and the claws of predators. Worse still, the black rhinoceros, a symbol of might in a species already threatened with extinction, has lost its shelter and its source of food from its young leaves. It has to wander further, facing thirst, hunger, and the ever-lurking poachers. A giant chain of dominoes begins to collapse because one tiny piece has been moved. All because a seemingly harmless alien ant has invaded a land that has been stable for thousands of years. A small beginning, but with huge consequences, enough to reshape the future of the African savanna. Nature is a giant web, where countless threads intertwine to keep life in balance. But pull just one thread, and the whole structure can collapse. And here, the pull doesn't come from lions. It doesn't come from elephants, the giants of the savanna. It comes from ants, tiny creatures, almost invisible under the cracked earth. No roar, no muscle power, just persistence, huge numbers, and a never-ending territorial instinct. They have quietly rewritten the story of the savanna. As native ants disappear, acacia trees fall, zebras change their paths, predators are forced to adapt, and eventually an irreversible chain reaction sets in. A chilling reminder: in nature, nothing is insignificant. Even the smallest creatures can change the very laws of survival.